Welcome to the Brubacher and Beyond podcast, where we are shaping the world we live in. Today we have a special guest, Senator Zimmerman, with us today on this rainy day that is not good for the excavation world, to be honest with you. We do need some sun, we need some clear skies so we can move some dirt, because right now job sites are a muddy mess, but that's part of life, right? When God gives us sunshine, there is going to be rain on the other side and hopefully some rainbows. So thank you for being here today. I appreciate your time. For our audience, do you want to give them a little bit of your background and what you do?
I can, yes. So I'm actually a representative, not senator.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And that's all good. That's all good because both chambers work together and bills need to pass in both chambers in order to finally get to the governor's desk for passage. So very, very important. Yeah, so as a state representative, my district pretty much runs from the town of Whitehorse here in Lancaster County up to Reading. So I have some of that southern Berks is also part of the district. So lots of good people in the area. And what happens is every 10 years there's a census.
Yep.
And so in 2020 there was a census, and then after that takes place, we redistrict. And the idea is that every state representative has roughly the same amount of people within their districts. And so we're right about 65,000 people within a representative's district, and there's 203 of us throughout Pennsylvania.
So every 65,000 people, they would add a representative to the state as the population grows, is that correct?
So no, there's 203 representatives. So every 10 years, they redraft the boundaries of each district so that each rep has about the same number of people.
Okay.
And they try and get them pretty close. So it could, depending on population growth or decline in the state, reps could have more or less people. But the 203 number is solid. That stays no matter what changes. Yeah.
And so the area could increase or decrease depending on the population increasing or decreasing.
Correct.
Interesting.
And I'll give you an example. The last 3 cycles, every 10 years there's a redistrict, and every 10 years, the last 3 cycles, we've actually lost total population in Pennsylvania. And a lot of that is more in the western part of the state where the population's declining, because Lancaster County from 2010 to 2020, Lancaster County had 500,000 people in 2010, and today we're at 552,000. So we grew 52,000 people in 10 years. So
wow.
Huge.
That's 10%.
It's 10%, and yet our state as a whole lost total population.
And why do you think Pennsylvania is decreasing in population? Is a lot of mass exodus? What are causing some of those decreases?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. And the main reason is we have lots of schools, higher education, universities throughout Pennsylvania, and so there's a lot of students here in the state, and so many of them, large majority of them actually leave. And they're going to states like the Carolinas and Texas and states like that over the last number of years.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with opportunities and the job growth in some states compared to Pennsylvania.
Wow. So what are the mechanisms, or what happens to try to keep people here in Pennsylvania besides their family connections?
Yeah.
Which is strong here.
It is strong, yeah, and especially right where we live here in Lancaster County. So there are some efforts being made. Number one is that we've been trying as legislators to put more emphasis back on some of the trades and getting more students into trade schools versus 4-year art degrees or something like that, where jobs really are and are growing in numbers. So that's one thing we've been working hard on. At the same time, we've been working on some of the tax policies. How well business does has a whole lot to do with how many people they're hiring and what opportunities there are for students as they graduate. So the better business can do, the better our students will stay here and there's more opportunities for them. So that's a big priority for us as well.
Yeah, we just had an interview with a representative from Thaddeus Stevens and how that has transitioned to the opportunities in the workplace, that there are a lot of technical jobs that are out there. So it was pretty amazing what their initiative, and also the history of Thaddeus Stevens was pretty amazing as well. I didn't know all that stuff.
Yeah. That's an interesting comment there, because the big painting right in the House chamber in Harrisburg, up front it's William Penn sitting front center, but off to his right Thaddeus Stevens is standing on that.
Wow,
on
I didn't
that.
know that.
He was a House member in Pennsylvania. He was the most outspoken state representative against slavery.
Yeah.
And he was there just prior to the Civil War, and he traveled the South speaking out against slavery and lived right in Lancaster, almost in the square.
Wow.
And part of his house is preserved in what's now the convention center right there in Lancaster City.
Okay.
It's, if you go down in the bottom, the first floor there, they preserved some of the bricks and put new windows in his original house. So
wow, that's amazing.
Very interesting.
There's a lot of history. There's a lot of for how old the Commonwealth is and how it played a part in so many roles in our history as a nation. It's pretty amazing. I will say this brings us to the topic, what's going on right now in Iran. It's a hot topic that's happening. I'm interested to hear your perspective on what's going on. There's a lot of probably behind the scenes things that are happening also.
There's a lot's happening behind the scenes. I did have an opportunity to be with Congressman Lloyd Smucker last evening a little bit, but what's going on right now is a complete game changer. It's going to change the world. And so if all goes well, and the way that Israel and the U.S. have planned to kind of deal with Iran, who's been the center of terrorism throughout the world for a long time. And so having gotten rid of or killed the leader and many of his people, if a new government can step in and actually work with the other nations in that region as well as the U.S., that'll be a whole new world. Now, the challenge is, can that really happen?
Yeah.
Where a government steps up that's willing to work with the rest of the world and do the right thing by the people. And right now, it looks like they're on a mission to change what's happening in Iran. And what's really interesting is how many of, especially the younger Iranians, are stepping to the plate and they want the change.
Yeah.
And they're protesting. Now, there's that group that's still supportive of the old regime, but many are stepping up and saying, yeah, now's our chance.
Now's our time.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing when you look at some of the videos and what Iran was in the 60s and 70s and then how it just turned so fast and rapid.
Yeah.
And that regime that took over. So appreciate for that clarity. That's hot and heavy that's going on right now. As a Pennsylvanian, how does that affect us, or what mechanisms are going on behind the scenes?
Yeah. Well, the one thing with what's going on there, and of course there is that potential of really impacting the energy markets with what's going on there. At the same time, Pennsylvania has so much opportunity right under our feet here in this state that we've not captured and we've not capitalized on. And I don't know, maybe this is an opportunity, and maybe more will step to the plate to really open up those opportunities, because Pennsylvania has all this natural gas, and yet our environmental folks and led by our governor is actually trying to suppress all of that. And so maybe this is a time we can kind of re-engage and open those opportunities.
It's pretty amazing. Like when you look at the old oil companies, Quaker State, Pennzoil, they all came from Pennsylvania.
Exactly.
I mean, it's been a long list of companies that were able to harness and utilize our natural resources in Pennsylvania. Yeah, and the Marcellus Shale, I mean, that was a boom for a while. The units are down a little bit, but I do think that's something that Pennsylvania can keep prospering from and moving forward. The other thing that is a big economical growth for Pennsylvania is the farm industry. And from around here, we were just discussing about the milk. If you could describe to our audience what happened with that.
Yeah. So agriculture still is Pennsylvania's number one industry and number one employer, from the farm all the way through the processing of food. And what's happening in the dairy industry right here in Pennsylvania, dairy farmers are being paid $16 to $17 a hundredweight, and they need about $20 just to break even.
So they're losing money every day.
Every day.
Wow.
And that is not sustainable.
No.
And the dairy industry was, for many, many years, the number one sector within agriculture here in Pennsylvania. And about 2 years ago, maybe a little more, it dropped to second to poultry. Poultry kind of surpassed it. So very concerned about our dairy farmers, because it's been a very important industry.
Yeah, and it's very important to the area. There's a lot of history in the dairy farming, but if you take that industry away, I mean, that would be devastating. So what are the things that we try to do or you try to do for the dairy farmers? How do we help them?
Yeah. So I'm on the Agriculture Committee in Harrisburg. We talk about these kind of things a lot. Some of what we need to do is in dairy policy. Pennsylvania has a milk marketing board, and there's some stopgaps when prices really drop low, but only about 75% of dairy farmers are actually signed up for that program. There's some real challenges, but I think getting policy in a little better shape in Pennsylvania would go a long way for that industry. I can go on in agriculture. Lancaster County here is also the kind of ground zero for avian influenza, which is happening right now throughout Lancaster County. Chickens are getting avian, and they've been putting down full flocks of birds and just killing them. So that's happening right now as well. So that's a major impact for the whole ag industry as well.
Wow.
So, and I'm not convinced personally that just killing the birds is the answer. I think there's got to be some other ways to deal with an influenza like that. That's what we've been doing for 15 years is just killing birds.
And it hasn't helped out. No, it hasn't
changed.
It hasn't changed anything.
Right. But again, it comes down to policy on these issues, Chris. And I'll give you another example with our pollinators. Our bees are extremely important to agriculture. And right now, the bees and beekeepers are dealing with that hive collapse where they just lose hives. Well, you have that going on among other things. And right now, there's 6 pages of rules and regs regulating the whole beekeeping industry in Pennsylvania. And within the Department of Agriculture, they're redrafting all those regs, and as of last Tuesday, they were up to 95 pages of redrafting all these rules. And so the beekeeping industry is following that closely, and they're trying to interject their thoughts and ideas. But again, it's extremely important that our beekeepers are very involved in getting that policy in a little better shape as well. So I get concerned as government, we try and regulate and maybe over-regulate, and we need to make sure the industry's involved and the actual real-time farmers are involved in that process, and that we're doing it the right way and the right reasons and end up with the best policy.
Yeah, so they're going from a 6-page policy to a 92-page policy. That's a lot of regulation, and then that leaves in room for interpretation, who's going to oversee that, how those boundaries happen. So how do you then be involved and try to bring that to a sensible regulation for beekeepers?
Great question. So what happens is when a bill is introduced in the House, where most bills start, it needs to pass in committee and then pass on the House floor, and then it goes to the Senate, same process, and then finally to the governor, and if he signs it into law, then it's law. It becomes difficult to change because you have to go through the same process to change that. What's happening so much today is that within our state agencies, and in this case, the Department of Agriculture, they do regulations. And it's easy to do a regulation. It's also somewhat easy to take it away if we really need to. But I'm a big advocate of let's do these kinds of things in law so that they're solid in place and can't easily be changed. And I think that's better for an industry than regulations that are continually ratcheting up. So I think we need to do more policy in law rather than in regulation.
So one of the things, though, with our fiscal status in the Commonwealth, the budget has been increased rapidly over the past couple years. Is that sustainable to keep on that growth over time? Also, it looks like we're dipping into the rainy day fund. There was some Marcellus Shale funding that was in there to help that, and that's been kind of utilized. So I wanted to get your thoughts on the budget that was just passed and what's this path we're leading down.
Yeah, so with budget, so the governor just gave his budget address here the first week of February, which is normal, where he'll come into the House chamber and give his budget, and the senators join us, and the senators and House members hear the governor's address and his wish list, his budget address. And so he gave us that, but keep in mind that back in November, we finally passed this past year's budget. And in that budget, we're spending $5 billion we don't know where it's coming from. $5 billion.
Wow.
So it's a $50 billion budget, and we're spending $5 billion. We don't know where it's coming from.
10% we
Very
don't know.
high. We don't know. And so when the governor gave his budget address, he was asking for an additional $3 billion in this year's budget. So again, where's that coming from? And so now, the last several weeks, we've been doing budget hearings. And what that amounts to is, as Appropriations Committee, we meet with the secretaries of each agency. So agriculture, health, education, each agency comes and gives us the reasons they need the money they're asking for within that budget. And then after that, it's the House's responsibility to actually put a budget together. And then finally work with the Senate, massage that, and get it to the point where the governor's ready to sign it into law. And the hard reality is, if we would accept the budget he gave us in March in his budget address, we will deplete all of the rainy day funds. And then going into next year, in 2027, at that point, there's no way we can get a budget balance without a tax increase. And that's what we've been trying to avoid. And unfortunately, that's where that would be heading. And the other thing is, our rainy day fund is, in case there is a downturn in the economy, that's what that's there for. What do we do if we deplete that and all of a sudden we have a downturn? How do we keep going? And at that point, you certainly wouldn't want to do a tax increase. But we have to get our arms around this whole fiscal picture and not spend more than we bring in.
100%, because it's been ongoing spending and spending and spending and increasing, even though the Commonwealth has grown economically. Well, also we were talking about the population decrease, but economically it has grown, which is a good thing, but the depletion of the rainy day fund. When did that start? Has that always been part of Pennsylvania, the rainy day fund?
No.
Or that was fairly recent, right?
Yeah. So we've had a rainy day fund and we've not had one, and in recent years we've put monies back into a rainy day fund. So we have about $7 billion in the rainy day fund, and we need to have that. As a matter of fact, we should make that a little higher, because keep in mind, what the governor is asking for this year is $53 billion.
Wow.
And also, just consider this, Chris. So when I first came into the House 12 years ago, we passed a $28 billion budget. So we went from $28 billion to $53 billion, or at least a $53 billion ask. We may not give them quite that much, but that's how much we've increased just in 12 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's significantly increasing.
Yeah.
Being a taxpayer, where does that go? Right? What has increased that much in services, or what's the big thing there?
Yeah. So when you really take a good look at the budget, 40% ends up being the human services type programs, and a lot of those have increased because there's more people get into some of those categories and so forth. And then there's 40%, maybe a little more than 40 at this point, is education, because we've just continued to throw big dollars at education. So the last several years, we've given an extra $1 billion year over year just to education, and we're now up to $23,000 per student in Pennsylvania. So we're one of the highest in the country, and our performance is nowhere near where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Our reading and writing scores, I don't have those exact numbers, but we're basically failing, and yet we keep throwing more money at it. So something's got to change in that whole education system to get more results out of the dollars we're spending.
Yeah. One of the things that I was really thinking about when I was preparing this, one of the things is, especially the stuff that's going on in Iran, you see so many people that are like stressed about it. And I get it. It is something to be concerned about, but I just feel like overall as a society, we're more stressed than ever. Like you said, we're spending more money on education. Our scores aren't going up for that. There's a lot of things that are happening with social media and stuff.
What's also happening kind of politically is when you look at the Republican Party, when you just look at the state level, and you can look nationally and look even in some local sectors, on the Republican side, there's more of us conservatives that are actually being elected in recent times.
Yeah.
But on the Democrat side, they're electing socialists. So that's like polar opposites. And even 12 years ago when I first came to Harrisburg, in the Democrat side there was Blue Dog Democrats, that they call themselves that. They're fiscally conservative, socially not so much. Very easy to work with on a budget because they understood that. And then there was the moderates and the more liberal Democrats. Today, it's moderates and socialists on our side. Among the Republicans, also, we probably become more divided within our own party, where the conservative side is growing and the more liberal Republicans are decreasing. So that's what we're seeing.
And you find a lot, too, even socially, if you're out with family, and there's the red and the blue, and there's tensions at the dinner table, and no one can talk anymore. I'm like, what can we agree upon first? Let's see what we all agree. We agree we should have clean water. We agree that we should have good roads so we don't blow tires out on potholes. Like, there are some things that we can agree upon. Let's agree upon those things. But it's like, no, you're that way, and I can't talk to you. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah,
I'm sure you see it a lot.
Yeah, we do deal with it a lot, and it's become a bit more challenging. And I do know that there was a time when we debate in committee and we give our comments on the floor, and then we go for dinner, Democrats and Republicans. And today it's much more, well, some Republicans go for dinner and some Democrats go for dinner, but we're not doing it as much together.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. At the same time, I have some good friends on the other side. And what is interesting is I can have a conversation on a bill and they're agreeing with me, but the Democrats tend to follow their leadership much more than Republicans do.
Yeah.
They're
They
kind of
stay in line.
lockstep and,
They might agree with something, but they're like, hey, just because I'm on,
Yeah.
So for fiscal responsibilities, when we were talking about like the increase in the budget, if the budget keeps on increasing, taxes would probably have to go up to counter that. So as a business, though, that's really not something that we can, it's put into law and then we follow it. But what's the balance with increasing the taxes? In your perspective, how does that slow the economy down?
Well, a couple of things. If you do those increases, for one, that's automatically a strain on business, strain on families. But what also goes with that is just the whole conversation that taxes have gone up, and I think people tend then to pull back. So I think you get that double whammy of an economy then really slowing down because it's kind of a double-edged sword in a way. So therein lies some of that challenge. But right now, think about what was in that big, beautiful bill that was passed nationally. I don't think people realize yet what was in there in the way of tax cuts for businesses, for families, for things like overtime, and the impacts of some of that.
Yeah.
People may only be seeing some of the results of all of that.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure people realize how big that really is. And so hopefully with all of that, the economy will start picking up because that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, I can say this in the construction industry. If you look over year, it's a small increase, but most of those increases have come from data centers. And I would say Pennsylvania, though, is on a very fine line of ice, in my opinion, because of the opposition that these data centers are getting right now could slow that growth in the Commonwealth. The other thing, though, is Pennsylvania is positioned perfectly for data centers. We're so close to other states that could utilize that technology. We do have the Marcellus Shale. We have resources underground that could generate power to power these data centers because you have to have power for them. And the other thing is the connectivity. We do have a large data line that runs from Ohio to New York to New Jersey. And I would say this to other people too. If they looked, the state of Maryland put an extra tax on data centers and it drove them out. And Pennsylvania was welcoming them to come in, but there's been a lot of opposition recently against data centers in Pennsylvania. And it almost feels like when we talk about power and energy, it's like, not in my backyard, right? Like everybody agrees we need power plants, we need sewage treatment plants, we need those utilities and infrastructure, but they don't want it in their backyard. Yeah. So it's one of those things.
Yeah, there's been a lot of conversation with these new data centers, and hard reality is that we want them here in this country. We don't want them in China. We want them here. And they're going to be job creators. It's going to provide a lot of work just to build them. But the conversation ends up being they take a lot of power and they take a lot of water. Do we actually have that available? And what does that do to a community? And So some of the conversations in Harrisburg on a state level is, should we in Harrisburg be providing some kind of guidance? Maybe we should say or put something into place that these data companies need to come with their plan to bring electricity and make sure they have the water they need, or if they're using fans, that they're somewhere where the noise isn't going to be a problem in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
Because what's happening is that a lot of it's being left to the local governments.
Yeah, to figure.
And so many of them, they have day jobs, and this is something they do for their community as township supervisors and the likes. And I think we're being a little bit unfair to them, that the decision's all up to those folks. So I think there's this balance of the state taking some leadership and working with local governments on that. But somehow we want them here. How do we make that happen? How do we get them powered? How do we keep them cooled? And what does it take?
Yeah. But it starts with what we just talked about. Communication, talking about it, finding out what concerns your neighbor might have. Is it noise? Is it the water? Is it the resources? Then how do we counter that and move forward and really bring that opportunity to Pennsylvania? Because it's going to be a great opportunity for a limited amount of time. Because once the data centers are built, and approximately 900 of them are on to be built throughout the nation, once that infrastructure is built, those buildings are done, and then they're just going to replace the internal parts.
Yep.
So as we do discuss the economy of the construction industry, there's a slight bit of growth that's going to happen in 2026 that's projected with the data centers. But there is one of the things that is happening in Harrisburg is the PLAs.
First off, Chris, when it comes to business, so I'm a huge proponent of small business because small business, they employ 52% of all the employees across the country, and they're much closer to the community. They generally are much more involved in giving to a community than large business, and there are economic drivers. And I keep saying to various business groups, with business, we have everything. Without business, we have nothing, because that really is our economy.
Yeah.
They're job creators, they're all of that. So what's been happening in Pennsylvania, we have a governor with Governor Shapiro where he is all about the unions and empowering them and giving them opportunities up and above the private sector organizations, the open shop companies. And so when you have things like PLAs and also what's now known as RCOs, so PLAs would be project labor agreements, and RCOs are reliable contractor ordinances. And so when you take a reliable contractor ordinance, which Reading City adopted, for example, that means that when it's a public project that's being bid, only union contractors can bid in a municipality or a city that's an RCO municipality. And that is completely unfair to the private sector industry. I'm a huge believer that unions are allowed to do what unions do, but let's make sure it's a fair playing field between them and the private sector companies. It should be an equal playing field, equal opportunities to bid projects. And RCOs simply don't allow anybody but union contractors to bid. Completely unfair. And PLA is kind of the same story. It's given the unions an advantage over all other companies.
Yeah.
Unfair.
And that's something that's happened with this administration. The governor, since he's been elected, he's been a heavy opponent of that.
Yeah, he does everything he can to support unions, and of course unions support his campaign. And we talk so much in government today about transparency and equal opportunity and the likes of that. Well, these two things, PLAs and RCOs, are not that.
And so what do you do to combat that, or what are things that representatives like yourself agree upon how it should be?
Yeah. We have some bills that have been introduced, and I've co-sponsored some that other representatives have introduced, trying to push back on these kind of things. Work real closely with some of the construction trade kind of associations like ABC that you may be familiar with. But organizations like that, these trade associations that are representing small contractors and so on, extremely important that they're out there and speaking, and then meet with us on a regular basis so we know what the issues are, so we can try and get legislation, and if not legislation, some kind of policies in place that actually make some improvements and opportunities for small contractors like that.
Yeah. And so one of the balances, right, if the economy is growing too fast, we see rapid price increases. How do you see keeping that balance, or where does that balance need to be sustainable growth, but also give opportunities to people so they don't leave Pennsylvania? We retain the residents we have that have gone to school here, that have families here. So what's that balance look like?
Yeah, and that's a good word, balance. And I think what we need to be doing more as Pennsylvania is look to a state like Texas, look to the Carolinas, look to Florida. Some of the things they've done to try and balance all that, and look at the growth they've had. They've had growth in population, they have growth in business and economics in general. Those states have just been doing so much better. So what can we learn as Pennsylvania from those states that we can implement to get that balance in a little better shape?
So one of the things we talked about was balance, but opportunity, right? These data centers are an opportunity, and we all agree that we need data centers, and we don't want them overseas, and there's real opportunity for economical growth and also sustained business. But then there's that, it might take up some land, it might take up some farmland or some other land that needs to be developed. How do we keep that balance, right? How do we not become a too crowded, populated city with no trees and no grass, and also have the rural farmlands that we have today?
Yeah. So that's a great question as well, because I think we're in a time when we should really be doing a lot more long-range type land planning. When you look at just Lancaster County, for example, we grew 52,000 people in 10 years. Well, we know that took some housing. So a couple things. One is I'm actually an advocate of, what about a Lancaster City? What's wrong with going a little higher? What's wrong with a couple more floors? And what's wrong with the idea of some developments, especially in the suburban areas, that might be a little more dense?
Okay.
And that, I believe, would help us actually save farmland.
Yeah.
Because I'm also a huge proponent of saving the best of farmland. So back to data centers, what about we try and make sure those data centers are on maybe more marginal lands? They don't have to be on prime agriculture land.
100%.
And so I think the whole land planning and long-range land planning is something that we maybe haven't done enough of locally or on a broader scale. So I think there's a huge opportunity there.
Right now, it's each municipality has a zoning board, right, and decides. In the state level, does the state look over those zoning boards and give a larger land plan? That doesn't happen right now.
So in the House where I'm at, there's a committee that's the local government committee. So they're looking at and introducing legislation revolving around local government. So something like land planning absolutely comes into their purview, where they're looking at implementing some legislation that helps with those kinds of things. So they're looking at everything related to local government. On a local level, though, your township supervisors, township commissioners in larger townships, or councilmen, they're all elected to give direction and help manage that municipality. And then they appoint, on the local level, the boroughs and townships would be appointing planning commission members. And their whole responsibility is to help do these plans and longer range planning. And it's a recommending body. And those individuals, I don't know what kind of help and training they're getting, but there is a trade association for townships, there's a trade association for boroughs, and those associations oftentimes have somebody at Harrisburg during our session days. So there's a lot of dialogue, a lot of conversation going on. And then on a local level too, townships and boroughs would be appointing zoning hearing board members. And the zoning hearing boards are to simply allow for an exception on a certain piece of property or not, where a planning commission is the recommending body on how land is used and how things are applied. So it's a real democratic system. The question becomes, like a data center, that's so new and it's so different, and it's like nobody's really prepared to handle that. And therein lies the challenge of how do we all communicate to make sure they're at the right location, that the energy and cooling needs that they have are somehow met in a good way, and not really suppressing a community because of handling it the wrong way.
Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into it. I appreciate all the work that you do. We're a big supporter of you. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for the stances that you take. I would say to anybody that's listening to this podcast, how do they get in touch with you, or how do they follow your work?
Yeah, I want to say this, that I, as a state representative elected by the people of the 99th District, I don't see myself as government. I see myself as having been elected by the people to be their representative to government. So that makes my job is to actually get answers from our state agencies, from government, for the people.
Yep.
And Chris, if you yourself were trying to get answers from one of our state agencies, it's very difficult. But if you come to an office like mine, my staff fully understands where we are and what our position is, and they work diligently to get answers.
Yep.
And some days that's very difficult, but that's what they do.
Yeah.
And so that's, I believe, the first and foremost responsibility of what I do. Outside of drafting bills, I have 40-some pieces of legislation that are in the system, either still in committee or partway through the process, and some of them are really pushing back on regulations and so forth. But that is the job, and if there's anything related to whether it's PennDOT or this time of year it's taxes or unemployment, anything like that, just come to my office. It's right by Iron Spire along 272. We're behind the Iron Spire venue that's out front.
Yep.
And anyone can stop in there, and staff is there to help. So blessed with really good staff, and they fully understand their job. There's so many elected officials today. It's not about serving as much as it is about seeing if they can get into another position or a higher position. And the ones that are really dedicated to serving the people, I believe, is what the founder's vision really was. So, and that's what we try hard to do in my office. So, great question.
We appreciate it. Yes, anytime we deal with your staff, they're very timely on it, work very diligently. Stuff outside this podcast that we've also inquired about, so we do appreciate that. What does the future look like in your perspective? I'm a very positive person. I think the best days are yet to come, but we got to be good stewards about that, and we always have to work hard, right? But I think there's going to be great days ahead.
I agree with you, and I'm an optimistic individual as well, and I really believe that as much pushback as President Trump gets, even going into Iran, none of us have any idea what this would be like, but the hard reality, if a nation like that gets a hold of nuclear weapons and they start using them around the world, we are in big trouble.
Yes.
They could destroy the world.
Yes.
And all of us. And so trying to end a regime like that and get us back on track, if that all works, which it is a risk without doubt, then I think that, we could have some really, really good days and opportunities ahead of us. And I think Trump's respect and leadership around the world is going to be really gain in respect, and there's going to be a lot more opportunities going ahead and working together as nations and so forth. But right here at home, what we have to do in the state of Pennsylvania is we have to empower and allow our small businesses to thrive. And the way to do that is to take a lot of these regulations that are out there away. When we have 630,000 regulations just stifling business, we have to remove some of those so that business can thrive. And when business thrives, the employees thrive, the families thrive, it all works together. And when all that's working well, in a community like ours that have so many Christian men and women and families out here that want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And in the midst of it all, they want to serve the Lord. And this community is so giving when it comes to some of our nonprofits, our faith-based nonprofits and the likes of that. It's just amazing what's happening in our community. So there's something special about Lancaster County, but Lancaster County is only going to be as good as all of us and what we do with it. And the better we have Pennsylvania, the easier it's going to be for Lancaster County.
100%. So I appreciate your time today on this Brubacher Beyond podcast. I would say to everybody, if you like it, please share, rate us, give us however many stars you think we deserve. If you don't like us, you can email us, or you can give us some topics that you would like to hear Representative Zimmerman, we appreciate again everything you do. We appreciate you coming in every year to the Brubacher and Beyond podcast. And this definitely is a Beyond podcast, and hopefully it informs some of our community members.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the Brubacher podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to our podcast so you can listen to the new episodes each month. Share it with your friends in the industry and those who might like to learn more about the construction industry. Feel free to check out our website at www.brubacher.net. I'm Keith Brubacher, president of Brubacher Excavating Incorporated, and we hope you found our discussion insightful, and we look forward to the next time together.